In this video, we're going to learn how to use the Simsol Depreciation Table. The Depreciation Table lets me quickly apply depreciation to all of my estimate repair items without having to go through and address each one of them individually. So as you can imagine, this is a huge time saver. I can either elect to apply the depreciation before I start writing the estimate or after I'm done. It really comes down to personal preference. But depending on which method you decide to use, there are some things you need to know about depreciation tables that will save you a lot of time in the long run. So let's go ahead and jump into a file here that I haven't started yet in terms of adding any repairs, and we'll take a look at how to apply the depreciation before we get started on the estimate so you can see how it actually works. So I'm going to jump into this file here. And as I go to the building estimate scope of damage screen, you'll notice I don't have any areas created yet. So this would be an example of setting the depreciation before I even get started. So to do that, I'm going to go to the building estimate screen. Come to the top here, click on Depreciation Table. This brings up the local depreciation table editor. As I'm looking at the screen on the bottom left here, you'll see there's 4 different depreciation methods. And what that's basically telling me is there's 4 different ways that I can depreciate my repair items, and based on a certain criteria that I select here. The first method would be scope. If I click on scope, what that's showing me is anytime I go select a repair, depending on the function that I select, I can apply a depreciation percentage to that repair based on the function. So in other words, if I have a room that's got remove and replace drywall and I've selected that repair, I can apply a specific depreciation percentage to that scope. So any repair that I pick in my estimate that uses remove and replace as the function will get a 10% depreciation. Now, while this method works well, it might not be specific enough in terms of how you want to apply depreciation. So my next option would be to select Trade. Trade lets me apply depreciation to all my repairs based on what major trade and sub-trade that repair falls in. So I might have a specific percentage I want to apply to all, say, carpentry, and at the same time have a higher or lower percentage that I want to apply to electrical work. So how that would work is I would come up to the top to select the major trade that I want to apply depreciation to. We'll say in this case carpentry. I click carpentry. And this will show me all of the sub-trades available under carpentry. At this point, I can go through and apply a specific percentage to each sub-trade and continue on doing that until I'm done. Or if I do want to apply a specific percentage to everything in this particular trade of carpentry, I can just click on this All button at the top, enter something such as 20%, hit OK, and the table will apply 20% depreciation to all of my carpentry subtrades. And then I will just continue on picking major trades and applying the depreciation to all the subtrades that fall underneath that trade. Now the next method over to the left is scope with age. Now this reverts back to our original method of just using scope. However, this takes into account how old the actual estimate item is. So just like before with remove and replace, let's say I was replacing an entry door. I've got these 3 columns now where I can apply a different percentage based on how old the item is. So let's say for the first year of the item, I'll apply 10% depreciation. Any additional year after that, I can apply an additional 5%. And then the max percentage that I would apply to that door would say be 50%, regardless of how old it is. Now here's something that's very important about using this particular method. For this method to work, I've got to make sure I enter an economic age here at the bottom left of the screen. And this won't apply just to that door. It will apply to every item that I place into the estimate from this point on. So if I determine that the economic age of this particular loss is, we'll say 7 years, by entering that 7, when I go to my estimate and I select a repair item, it will automatically assign an economic age of 7 years to that repair, and therefore make sure I'm getting the right depreciation percentage based on what I've entered into this table. Another thing to take note of, over here on the bottom left, there is a checkbox here for materials only. What that does is make sure that my depreciation is only being applied to material costs, not labor or equipment. This is very important if you need to make sure that the materials are the only thing being depreciated within your estimate. Now moving back over to the different methods of depreciation, the very last one is trade with age. This one is by far the most specific way to add depreciation to your repair items by using a table. Once again, this one reverts back to the original method of trade, but it adds the age factor. So if we go back to our example of carpentry, I can select carpentry as the major trade and then apply a specific percentage to all my subtrades based on how old the items are. So for all my carpentry items, if I want that first year depreciation percentage to be 10, I'll enter 10 here under the All button. Any additional year, I can say 5%, and then max everything out at 50%. Now this particular table, Trade with Age, as you can see, when you're first starting out, there's nothing in there. So you'd actually have to go through and set all these percentages yourself and then save this table so you can recall it at any time. So if I were to go through and save all these percentages, I would come up here to the top and say Store Table. I would give this particular table a name. And hit Done. Once I've stored that table, I can access it from any estimate I'm in from this point forward by simply coming up here and hitting Recall Table. That'll bring up a list of any tables that I've saved and insert them into the claim I'm currently working on. Now Simsol's done something great here. We've actually provided you with a depreciation table with a lot of these values already filled out. If I want to use the Simsol table, you'll notice this button over here to the right, Simsol Table. I'll click on that, and that will bring up a disclaimer just letting you know where this table is derived from and also informing you that you still want to review your depreciation percentages once you're done with the estimate to verify that everything looks correct from your own vantage point. The values in this table are comprised of different industry averages and are here to provide you with a good basis or starting point with depreciation, and then you can make adjustments as you see fit. So once I've read through the disclaimer, I just go ahead and click Yes here. I then verify that it's the Simsol building depreciation table that I want to use and click OK. Because I already have a table in this estimate, it's asking if I want to replace it with a Simsol table. I'll say yes. So right away, now I'm looking at the Simsol table. You can see I've got different percentages already pre-populated into the different trades based on what Simsol's been able to compile in this table. So you can see a huge time saver where you don't have to go through and create the table yourself. You can use the Simsol table as your basis and go through and make edits however you see fit. So once again, I've got my economic age set to 7 years. Now because I replaced the table, I've got to recheck this box Materials Only to make sure I'm only depreciating materials. So now that this is all set, let's go ahead and see how this works here. I'm going to go ahead and hit Done. And you'll notice on the building estimate information screen, it tells me the depreciation table in use is the Simsol building depreciation table, and the method that it uses, Trade with Age, and then finally, it's only depreciating materials within my estimate, and that checkbox verifies that for me. Okay, so let's go ahead and add a couple repairs and we'll see this table in action. So I'm going to go to the Scope Advantage screen, create a new area. Just go ahead and give this area a name, give it some dimensions here, and we'll go ahead and scope it. Okay, so here we are on the virtual scope sheet. I'm just going to select a couple repairs here and we'll see if we get depreciation automatically added into our estimate. So let's go to say wall items. We'll pick the drywall taped and floated and we'll do a scope 3, remove and replace. So right away as I look at the repair item details down at the bottom of the screen, I can see I have a depreciation percentage of 7%. I also have an age of 7 years. So because I have that table in place, as I add repairs, the depreciation is automatically being applied. Now one other thing it is showing me as well is a depreciation dollar amount. Now as you remember, we were depreciating materials only, so this dollar amount should reflect 7% of the material cost of the repair. And we can check that by going to the override screen, seeing the breakdown of labor, material, and equipment cost in this particular item, and then also verifying our age, depreciation percentage, and then final dollar amounts here for depreciation of the materials. Now another thing I can do here from the repair item override screen is over to the right there is a checkbox here, Depreciation Recoverable. If the depreciation for this particular repair needs to be deemed non-recoverable, I can simply uncheck this box here. But in the case of drywall, I'm going to go ahead and leave this box checked. So let's go ahead and hit done and add a couple more repairs, and we'll continue to see our depreciation get added to the estimate. So next let's go to, say, electrical items, and we'll pick some electrical outlets. I'll do a remove and replace. I'll change the quantity to, say, 5. Okay, you see I'm getting a depreciation percentage of 28%. My economic age is automatically input, giving me a depreciation dollar amount. Okay, and I'll pick one more item here just to give us one more example. So ceiling items, and we'll pick some ceiling drywall. Now I'm going to do something a little different here. Instead of picking scope 3, which is our remove and replace, I'm going to pick them separately. So I'll first pick the remove scope, which is scope 1. And if you're not familiar with our scopes, if I come up here to the right and hit this drop down and select scopes, this provides a legend of what all our scopes represent here. So you see 1 is remove, 2 is replace, 3 being remove and replace. So like I said, instead of doing 3 remove and replace, I'm going to pick scope 1 here for the ceiling drywall. Now I picked remove. Now you'll notice what's happened here. My depreciation percentage is 0. There is no depreciation. Now the reason for that is there is no materials in a removal, so therefore there's nothing to depreciate. However, if I come up and pick my replace scope of scope 2, then I get my 7%, I get my economic age, and I see my depreciation dollar amount based on the materials of the replacement. Okay, so that kind of shows you how to implement the depreciation table before we start writing the estimate. I personally think this method is much better. You get to see the depreciation on each item as you add it, and you can change it, make your overrides if you see that you need to here as you're actually writing the estimate. The other option would be to write the entire estimate first and then apply a depreciation table after the fact. It still works. The only problem with that is you may not right off the bat see the percentage being applied to every item. So there could be items there where the depreciation percentage might need to be adjusted. You might not be aware of it. So I think this method is definitely the way to go. Now there might be an instance where maybe you just forget to set up the depreciation table and you've completed the estimate and you have to go back and apply it after the fact. So let's jump into another claim and I'll show you exactly how you would do that. It does have some limitations, however, mostly relating to the economic age. So let's get out of this file, go to another one, and I'll show you what I'm talking about here. So I'm going to hit done, get out of this claim. I've got another file here that's set up, and the estimate's already been written. You can see I've got a list of areas here, and each one of my areas does have highlighted area totals, and I've got estimate totals off to the right. Now let's take a look at this file and see what type of depreciation we're using in this. So this is using a table. As you can see, the method is scope. The name of the table is 30% materials only, which tells me right away that this table is using the scope method to depreciate, and it's just applying 30% across the board. So let's pull that table up here. Okay, and as I'm looking at the table editor, everything I just said has been verified here. I'm applying 30% to replace, 30% to R&R, remove and replace, and 30% to paint and finish. Now, another thing I can do is I can remove all depreciation from this screen as well. So if I want to set the depreciation method to none on this claim, I'll then need to select an item up here that dictates how this change is going to affect the estimate. So what I'm doing is I'm going to set it to none and hit this option up here at the top. Update all line items in this estimate and exit. What that basically means is sweep through this estimate and remove all depreciation. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. This global change process comes up and it shows me now that my ending totals for depreciation is 0. My starting total was 636.50 and the difference 636.50, meaning I've removed all depreciation from this particular file. So let's imagine I didn't just go through that process there. We had just completed this estimate, forgot to put depreciation into it at all. So at this point there's 0 depreciation and there's no table applied. So what I would do is I would come up to Depreciation Table Editor once again, and just like before I would pick one of the different methods here to depreciate by: scope, trade, scope with age, and trade with age. Now, herein lies a problem with using these two methods after you've written the estimate, scope with age or trade with age. Like I stated earlier in this video, the economic age needs to be set up before you start writing the estimate if you want that economic age to automatically be applied to all your repairs. Unfortunately, this field is not retroactive, so I can't come in here and put 5 years with the hopes that that is going to update all of my repair items in terms of economic age. It won't. It's something that we're working towards in terms of adding this feature, but at this point it does not work that way. So you really have two options here. Use one of these methods, whether it's scope or just trade, or I can use one of these methods, but if I do, what I will have to do is go back into my estimate and adjust the economic age for each individual line item. So that might not be worth your time doing it that way, and that's why I stress using the depreciation table, setting it up before you start estimating. And I think that you'll find that that's the better way to do it as well. So for this particular file, let's go ahead and use the trade method here. And I'm just going to pick a couple major trades. I'll say carpentry. I'm going to apply 25% to all carpentry. I'll go to finishes and apply 25% to all finishes. And then finally I'll apply 25% to all my electrical and hit OK. Once again, I'll come up here to the top, update all line items in this estimate and exit. So in other words, check every repair item in this file for those major trades and apply the appropriate percentage, which in this case is 25% across the board. So I'm going to go ahead and hit done. The global change process takes place, and it shows me my starting total of no depreciation, my ending total of $756.56, and the difference that made. The same number there is $756.56. So this went through and applied depreciation to those three major trades and all sub-trades falling within those trades and applied that 25%. So that's a basic overview of depreciation tables, specifically using the Simsol table, which we recommend. Like I said, my biggest recommendation is applying that table before you get started because it takes care of that economic age factor right off the bat. Not only that, you get to see the depreciation as you're adding your repairs, and you can either verify or edit that depreciation as you move along throughout the estimate. So this is a great time saver, a great feature, and I hope this video helped you guys. And if you do have any questions about this particular feature or any other features, be sure to contact our support staff online at simsol.com and go to the support page there, and they'll be happy to answer your questions. Thanks a lot.